Hi, welcome back to Reading with John. I'm John, and I'm reading. I'll be reading Margie and the Wild Dogs, Meet the Bible Shredder, once again. If you haven't kept up, we are in chapter 2. Okay, we're just beginning chapter 2, which is called The Tomb. And I am at the Polynesian Resort at Disney. The family's at the pool, enjoying themselves. I'm gonna shoot a half a chapter maybe and get out of here, catch up with them. If you look all the way in the background there, you'll see, I think that's the Magic Kingdom, and that big white dome is that crazy roller coaster, Magic Mountain. I think that's what it is. Well, anyway, here we go. Oh, I'm reading out of the book, not my iPad, so I'm gonna have to use my bifocals. Take these off. Okay. Meanwhile, below that immaculate wall, roaming around like zombies, the wild dogs pondered and regretted the decision that had placed Margie in such grave danger. "Look at her," said Skittles. "She can't move, and one good strong breeze will blow her right off the top." Margie was like a sister to the wild dogs. Their concerns were now larger than life. Ideas were flying as Lucas thought calling the fire department might be a good idea. Jose came up with the brilliant idea of rebuilding the human ladder. Then he vetoed his own idea, remembering he had lifted Margie several inches to the top and believed he couldn't reenact it in reverse. The fire department idea was also rejected in fear they would be all sent to prison. Stuck up on that wall top, Margie quickly became their second concern, as Pitt saw a vicious Black Panther slowly heading in their direction. From the stare in the eyes of that hungry beast, they quickly became its prey. Grabbing sticks and stones to break its bones, the wild dogs began a full frontal assault on the panther. Although they managed to bounce a few stones off its head, that only agitated it more. That big black cat continued picking up speed. Within seconds, it was leaping through the air to pounce on them. Crying in panic, Lucas, always one for a good joke, could be heard from under his breath saying, "I only need to outrun one of these suckers." It looked now as if Skittles would be the panther's dinner. Just before the creature would pounce on Skittles, they heard a loud boom. With one shot, the Black Panther was dead, and there stood an old man wearing a cowboy hat, sporting a Santa Claus beard. The boys watched in awe as puffs of smoke continued to trickle from the shotgun barrel. "Whoa!" said Skittles as he fell to his knees with praying hands, crying out with thanks to the old man who just saved his life. Any notion Skittles previously had about God being a myth vanished. As the old man stood before them, he was bombarded with questions. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" They rambled on for a few minutes before the old man abruptly interrupted them. Quiet, my name is Gabriel. I come from the same town as you. I have known all of you since you were born." He looked at Skittles and said, "I am a big fan and watch your sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, perform at Lou's Diner every weekend. I also work with your dad at the apparel factory." "Really?" Skittles looked stunned. "Yes, I'm sure you were never told the truth about your dad driving the forklift off the dock that day." "Truth? What do you mean, truth?" muttered Skittles. "Your dad was not drunk that day. He was sober and saved a man's life with his heroic actions." "What do you mean?" Skittles asked again. "The drunk man that day was not your dad. It was Andy Schaefer. The forklift would not stop as Andy fell in front of it, and your dad's quick reaction saved his life. He took himself and that lift to a staggering 5-foot journey, slamming it onto the pavement below the dock." Skittles' red freckled face now turned as white as a ghost, not believing his ears. Gabriel said, Had your dad confessed the truth, Andy would have been fired. With 8 children at home, Andy needed that job, so your dad took the blame. Skittles, your mom and dad are good people. Skittles' face regained its color, and with a sheepish smile, he nodded with his head softly. Then Gabriel looked at Lucas and said, "I love Snoopy and vanilla ice cream." Lucas was stunned. Gabriel told him, "Lucas, your sense of humor is staggering, even in the midst of danger." Pitts then put his head down and looked towards the floor as Gabriel reached over, placed one hand onto his shoulder, the other outstretched hand made into a fist. Gabriel said, "Trevon, you have taken up my habit." Then he opened his fist, and in his palm were 5 green olives. "These are for you, Pitts." As Pitts took the olives, Jose started to walk away. "Not so fast, Jose. Come back here," Gabriel said in a heartfelt voice. Jose walked back with tears in his eyes. "I guess you knew my parents." "I did," Gabriel answered. "I was there that tragic night." Jose was now full of pain as tears came pouring from his eyes. "Please tell me the truth, Mr. Gabriel." "Yes, Jose, I will. It happened fast and your parents endured no pain." The truck driver of that 18-wheeler fell asleep. "He crossed over into your parents' lane before your dad could react. Your mom and dad loved you so much they just wanted to get home to you that night. The driver of the truck that night was a good man who had driven all night trying to get home to see his dying wife. That man had several major breakdowns after that day, and today he resides in the town's mental institution." Then, feeling Jose's excruciating pain, Lucas, Pitts, and Skittles gathered around him, giving a group hug. As quickly as Gabriel had blown that panther from the sky, he was gone as the boys lifted their heads. Where did he go? Those were the words for the moment as their eyes searched the landscape around them. Both the panther and Gabriel had vanished without a trace. Skittles let out an eerie screech, then suggested, after such an emotional roller coaster, that it would be best if they made their way home. All in agreement, they started a slow trek back to town. Lucas then shouted, "Margie! Holy smackaroo, we forgot all about Margie." After their about-face, they began to discuss Margie's fate. "How are we going to get her down?" "Rocks, we will use rocks," said Jose. "But we need to make sure she drops onto the other side." "Rocks," said Lucas. "Yeah, the fear will prompt her into action," Jose said. "Let's make sure we don't unintentionally hit her." Those ringing sounds coming off the side of the golden wall were the rocks targeting Margie, as were the screams from below telling her to get off the wall and down onto the other side. Her only choices now were to take a chance on a 10-foot spiral onto a flatbed truck's rooftop and be on the inside of the golden wall, or a 20-foot drop onto the ground below and be back where she started. As those stones flew past her head, she freaked and swooped back down to the graveyard side. Again, she found herself dangling with a 10-foot drop below. Her fingers felt as if they were being sawed off from the pressure of her own weight. After a few minutes of dangling, she couldn't take the pain any longer. Margie let go and found herself flying with her arms stretched like a bird, trying to propel herself against gravity. Doomed for a crash landing, her body slammed onto the truck's rooftop below, then tumbled off the rooftop onto the flatbed. In a continuous motion, she rolled off the flatbed, crashed onto the ground. She was dazed and confused, and above her appeared a halo of twinkling stars orbiting in circles. She was stunned from the blunt trauma. Not seriously injured, Margie stood to her feet, and with a brisk sweep of her hands, she swept away those swirling stars from her eyes. If that wasn't enough for her to doubt her own eyesight, before her stood a 4-foot rabbit wearing grim reaper garb, swinging a sickle, saying, Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. I don't understand, Margie murmured. The rabbit spoke again, saying, your speed will be that of a rabbit, but your understanding is slow as a tortoise. Then came a loud ping, ping, ping. The rabbit ricocheted like lightning from truck to truck, quickly disappearing over the wall. Margie then detected rumbling sounds coming from the other side of the wall. Incoming crowbar! Incoming crowbar! Before she could make out the dialogue, over the wall came that heavy metal baton, accompanied with a loud swishing sound. The crowbar landed on her foot, sending excruciating pain up her leg. She could hear the wild dog screaming from the other side of the wall, panicking her into action. She stood up, holding the crowbar in one hand while massaging her leg with the other. She limped over to where the teens' voices were vibrating. Her task was to slam the golden panels loose with the crowbar from her side. She spent 5 minutes slamming, kicking, and pushing herself against those panels. Margie was hitting them with such force she became lightheaded and almost fainted. She was able to make a small opening to see onto the other side. Then Lucas told her to throw the crowbar back over the wall. As she looked up at the 20-foot wall, she knew there was no way she would be able to throw that crowbar that high. But she gave several half-hearted attempts. Boop, boop, that's the boat. That's it. I don't know where he's going. Looks like he's coming right at me. Each time she ran away to avoid the crowbar landing on her head. Margie could hear the wild dogs banging from their side, trying to make an opening wide enough to slip the crowbar through. Success! They did it! The opening was now wide enough to receive the crowbar. Within minutes, they dismantled enough of the panels for entry. The opening was instantly crowded with young bodies pushing and shoving their way into the golden graveyard. They were in awe that they were now on the inside of town's most restricted area. Margie tried in vain to communicate her experience with the rabbit to the wild dogs, but each one took off running to the truck that most represented their fantasies from childhood. Jose hopped onto a massive bulldozer, imagining himself pulling tons of earth into and filling a rapid moving river, while Skittles slipped behind the controls of a large crane, envisioning himself sending large concrete slabs way up into the sky. Lucas jumped into the back of a garbage truck, pretending to be a pig, snorting and squealing with laughter, while Pitts was dancing the tango on the top of a flatbed. Good times had just kicked in. Margie stood still as her nostrils noticed the smell of cotton candy. Between the rabbit and the cotton candy, Margie was overwhelmed with an extreme uncomfortable feeling. She shouted out to them in an alarming voice, "Get back here, get back here." Without hesitation, each jumped from their selected truck and ran to Margie. "Something is wrong, terribly wrong," she cried out. The wild dogs looked at each other as if she had lost her mind. Then, silence filled the air. Seconds later, the sky opened to mighty thunderclaps, while a rumble from below their feet caused a shift in the earth. The golden walls began to shake like rubber. Trucks began to unhinge as mechanical parts were zipping past their heads. It was a tremendous, freakish earthquake. Below them opened up a sinkhole, sending Margie and the wild dogs into a free fall. The sweet smell of cotton candy that Margie had previously experienced was now everywhere. As they descended, ghostly figures appeared alongside of them. What looked like a cat in a hat one moment turned into a woman holding an umbrella floating through the air the next. Then they heard loud bells and chimes coming from a red-nosed reindeer pulling a sled. Along each side of them were long glass tubes. Stuck within the tubes were princesses, princes, kings, and queens, all shackled in heavy metal chains, crying out in agony and squashed one on top of another. A A mighty voice blasted from above as the words, "Warp speed, Mr. Slinky," were heard, followed by, "Yes, Captain." Immediately, Margie and the wild dogs were falling faster than the speed of light. Then came heavy waves of warm, thick air pushing up from below, which slowed them into a soft, gentle float. That sweet smell of cotton candy began to dissipate as they landed onto a large colony of bunny rabbits. The group lay there motionless as hundreds of white rabbits hopped all over them. The little fuzzballs were everywhere, bumping and rubbing up against Margie and the wild dogs. What now for our friends? Will they hop with the bunnies? Will the cottontails flip tails? Or will they stay ahead of the wabbit? Here we go. After a few moments, Margie was able to stand, while bunnies jumped from her body and stripped cloth and linen tangled her feet. Looking around, she asked, "Where are we? What the heck just happened?" In a quiet, bewildered mumble, Lucas answered, "I'm not sure, but it looks like an empty tomb." "Empty tomb," Margie said. Then Lucas said, "There are carvings on the wall." "What does it say?" Pitts asked. Lucas then began reading. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter, the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they put him." So Peter and the other disciple started to run to the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. "Haven't we heard that somewhere before?" Margie asked as they moved towards the entrance of the tomb, trying not to squash any of the bunnies. Lucas was about to answer Margie when the walls around them began to vibrate, and a voice spoke from the brick saying, "Hey Margie, hey Margie." The words got louder and louder as Margie and the wild dogs started to tumble over one another. The herd of rabbits began tickling them into uncontrollable laughter. The laughter soon became doom and gloom as the walls opened, and out from behind them came 3 large, super-duper Gillette double-edged swords. The razor-sharp blades began chopping each of their bodies and the bunnies into hundreds of pieces. The slicing caused them no pain. As their blood flowed out from the tomb, it descended onto a white sandy beach. They were still conscious of their existence, although they were only blood. The bunny blood was separated from the human blood. The bunny blood evaporated immediately while the human blood splashed onto the shore. As their red goo hit the sand, it immediately began clotting back together. Margie and the wild dogs could feel thick lines in the sand outlining their bodies. The thick lines then brought them back into a physical existence. Margie was lying on her back in the sand, totally blown away from the experience. She then noticed the texture to be more like salt, not sand. She wiped her lips and tasted a salty flavor in her mouth. Rolling her eyes to the right, she saw Jose and Skittles both buried up to their necks in sand. Margie lifted her body and moved towards them and began burrowing away. As she tried to unbury her friends, the small grains of rock disappeared with each scoop. Then in the words, hey Margie," in a loud, high-pitched voice, sent her to her knees. Then wham! A tidal wave of water came crashing down, knocking her unconscious. This is where we end, okay? And I hope you enjoyed that little sight there. So we're going to leave off Margie getting whammed by that water. And in the next video, I will begin where I left off. So if you had not yet seen the other 3 videos, go back, watch them because it tells the beginning of the story. If you like the video and want to see more, please subscribe to this channel. Other than that, I have to get to the pool. My wife and my daughter are waiting for me. So God bless you, each and every one of you. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.